everybody. My name is Grace Drummond, and you are joining us for our Energy Explorer series. Joining me today is Emily Pasnak-Lapchick, and she's going to be talking quite a bit about her background and what brought her into coaching and what she's been doing since certification. So, Emily, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, like I mentioned, and tell us what you did before you became a coach?
Yeah, so very excited to be here. Thanks so much, Grace and Justin, for supporting me and bringing me here. So I have, for about a decade before becoming a coach, worked in a variety of nonprofits and foundations and have always been really passionate about human rights and social justice issues. So that's taken me on a few different paths before becoming a coach. And I felt, as when I was younger, I was really passionate about a lot of different issues and topics. And eventually, the issue of human trafficking felt like one to me that was really an intersection of a lot of different things that I cared about between gender rights, racism, forced labor, all different, poverty, all these things that came together. And I was really lucky straight out of undergrad to start an internship that then turned into a full-time role to build out nationwide awareness and advocacy program on that topic in the United States. So that really felt like my dream job straight out of college. I feel, I did work hard for it, but I also felt like really lucky that I got so many experiences and got to, be at the United Nations, be at these international conferences, be engaging with communities on issues that I cared about. And what I kept realizing, though, throughout that time was that the days where I would feel the most fulfilled and like I was really, walking away feeling like I had made an impact and that day was worth going through were the ones where I was either having a one-on-one conversation or smaller engagements with folks who were looking to figure out what unique role they could play or what impact they could make, either related to that topic or something else that they cared about. So kind of supporting them through that journey always was really fulfilling to me. And I think those were probably the first seeds that were being planted before I even knew what coaching was.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah.
Had you ever thought about coaching prior to that sort of aha moment, as we like to call them?
Yeah, I hadn't. I think the first time I was probably about 5 or 6 years into that job when a colleague was working with a coach and I was trying to make a big decision and she gave me a visualization exercise that her coach gave her and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I didn't, that was kind of the first time that I really learned what coaches did and how they could support people and I was intrigued from there.
Nice. Okay. So at that point, since you've been at that job for 5 to 6 years, what was that moment where you decided to pivot and do something a little bit different and perhaps create this business that you've got?
Yeah, great question. As I mentioned, I really loved that job and I loved the organization and everyone that I worked with. But I was finding it a few different things. I was finding it like really all consuming. I was so focused on my career and I loved what I did. So I was pouring lots of hours into it, but I was really burning out. I think I wasn't even as aware when it was happening of how many times I was just burning out over and over and over again. And the image of like burning from both ends of the candle. So I think part of it was that I was just kind of like exhausted. And then I also, I wasn't growing as rapidly in the role. And I realized that because of that, the program wasn't growing as much. So at that point, I decided that I wanted to sort of pivot and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. From there, I ended up going into a graduate program on social innovation, which was 9 months. It was very short, but it was a nice kind of moment to step back and really reflect and be able to engage with things in different ways. And actually, at the end of that program, we were gifted a complimentary coaching session.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, and two of our peers observed it. And as I was talking about the things that really energized me and what I just shared about the days I felt most fulfilled, both the coach and both of my peers were like, do you think maybe coaching is something that that you'd want to do? So I started to look into it after that. But, I just spent all this time and money investing in that master's program and was sort of trying to think of other things. And I actually ended up being unemployed after that for over 8 months. And that was a really, really difficult period in my life where I was trying to pivot my career and I was being really particular about where I wanted to work, but my identity up until that point was so strongly embedded with my career, and my sense of self-worth and value was also so deeply embedded with my career,
Right.
that not having work to do, really looking back on it now, and I've only really realized this the last few months, that was a really pivotal point in my life where I had to really figure out who I was, the things that I
Mhm.
cared about, and what value I added to the world and to my own self without having work.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what? I think that sitting in my role as an admissions coach, I hear things like that all the time where they are the job. And that's the thing that really pulls people away from having that balance or being able to live their best lives that they want to, because they're so attached to this and they see this way off in the distance. And then all of a sudden something magical happens. So I'm sure probably when you got laid off, it was like a big fear. I don't have this space anymore. What do I do to do it there? So in that 8 months time, how long did it take you to really decide what your next steps were going to be?
I had a particular vision. I really wanted to work on like fair labor and supply chains. Was
Mhm.
I wanted to work more at like the root cause of the trafficking and of the other issues. So I wanted like fair labor practices, and I wanted to create fair workspaces. Um, and honestly, if I'm honest, it got to a point where like I wasn't breaking into that. So I
Okay.
started looking more broadly, and I ended up getting initially a contract job that turned into a couple-year job. And it was there that I started working with a coach. And that job, it felt like it felt good. It was a great organization. It had great benefits. All the things that like sound nice and pretty and packaged.
Right.
But I really wasn't feeling that passion, that drive that I had experienced for so much of my life. And part of me tried to rationalize it to think, like, okay, this is fine, and
It'll be
career
good. I'll be okay.
and career is my identity, and I had just gone through all of that, and all of that was true. And also it just wasn't sustainable for me.
Mm.
So when I had a former colleague reach out, and they were going through a training program themselves to become a coach and offered to work together, I jumped at that chance, because I was just at a point where I honestly like couldn't recognize myself. I was, my shoulders were slumping down. I
Mm.
was just like so disconnected from myself, and that sense of like passion and drive and just love for life. Like I just, it wasn't all there. And through that experience, it was so transformative for me. I describe it as like I had mud caked on, like all these layers and mud caked on. And through that experience, I slowly started like lifting my shoulders and putting my head up, and the mud started cracking, and eventually it all washed off, and I was reconnected with who I've always been. And it was through that experience that I knew if I could hold that space for other people to have their own version of that
Mhm.
transformation and that reconnection, that would be such a fulfilling career. So that's when I decided to pursue coaching.
That's awesome. So what year was that?
So that was in 2020.
Oh, so pretty recent.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
love it. So while we're on the line, I just want to take a quick pause. Does anybody have any questions about what Emily has shared so far? Anybody have anything where it sounds like you? Because, most of the time, there's a lot of things in common when people start to look at coaching. Even though their backgrounds are different, there's some threads of commonality that work through why people might be looking for coaching. So if anything does come up, please feel free to type that in the Q&A box and we'll make sure that we can get them responded to as quickly as we can. Okay. So now that we just talked about phase one, let's talk about phase two, your coaching journey. So tell us a little bit about what made you choose IPAC and what you've done since you completed everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did take some time like thoroughly researching different coaching programs. I had a whole spreadsheet of,
I
the
know you
different
told me
aspects of
that.
them, the costs of them. And I kept coming back to IPEC. It was actually someone who I had worked with. She was a consultant that I had worked with, and I had reached out to her about different programs, and she suggested IPEC. And when I had my admissions call, I still remember that conversation. And one of the things that really drew me to it, as I mentioned, when I was working in nonprofits, some of the frustrations I had sometimes in that work was that it felt like reactive. We're not addressing the root causes. We're just addressing the surface level issues. And that was a really important thing for me to work on in that work. Like, let's address why things are actually occurring, why these, not just kind of putting that Band-Aid on at the end. And when I read about IPEC's approach to coaching and that same approach of looking at the root cause, figuring out what's actually causing that internal block that is most often, what people are coming up against, even if it seems like something that might be external. That was really appealing to me. And so that was the main part. And then all the other aspects that you can get 3 certifications within one program, that everything was sort of embedded within, that you get lifetime access to all these resources. Those were all important to me. And then finally, I had never run a business. I had no idea. I'd managed budgets for my organizations and worn a lot of different hats, but the running your own business is a whole different beast. So that part, that within the program was also included, business training, and the Quick Start program was also a really important part to me. And having spoken to other coaches from other programs, have been like, I'm a little envious that you had that, because they feel like that's something that was missing from their program. So all of those things are things that drew me to IPEC.
Nice. Okay. And from there, let's kind of talk about what you're doing now since graduation.
Yeah. So because of my background, something that was important to me going into the program was I knew that I wanted to make coaching something that was more accessible and more affordable to more people. I think that we're seeing the industry changing, and I'm meeting a lot of coaches who are doing coaching in different ways too. But historically, it has been a lot of like executives or people higher up in organizations, or people with access to a lot of capital. And having come from nonprofit organizations, having worked alongside different community movements, having been a shop steward for union organizing, all of those things, I really wanted to make sure that anyone could be able to work with a coach. So I set up my coaching business to be sliding scale for individual clients. So, if you're in a certain financial situation where you're really comfortable, you can travel a lot, you have no challenges paying your rent, you're not living paycheck, then you pay at the top of the scale. If you are maybe struggling with some of those areas but still really want this supportive partner to work through different parts of your life, then people can pay at the bottom end of the scale. And it's kind of, if you think of it as like this communal support structure, where if you have more access to money, you're kind of pouring into other parts of the community so that they can access the same benefits as you.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's been working really well, and really amazing to see how people have come to that, and people who get it and pay at the top of the scale, and other people who have said, if it wasn't for this model, I wouldn't have been able to afford to work with a coach. And I'm, constantly thinking of like, what other creative ways can I make it more accessible to?
But I love the fact that you're keeping it open to everybody that wants coaching, because you're right. There's different types of coaching that people can do. And the higher level might be the people that are looking for executive coaching, or where they want somebody to come into a company and coach their teams. They have that ability to pay that higher level. And then being able to help somebody that might not have it, but is still going to benefit from coaching. It's a win-win, and there's a lot of people that when they start out with their businesses, price point is actually one of the hardest things, I think. So for you, how you described it, it worked perfectly. But I'm curious as to how long did it take you to really come up with that concept?
Great question. So I think the first time I really started to not encounter, but understand sliding scale was when I was in grad school. I was living in San Diego, and I started learning about things like, mutual aid groups, and I had just wonderful, fantastic group of women that I met through that program who have taught me so much about economic justice and different models. And I was always a big proponent of like cooperative models. So that was something, when I'm talking about like fair labor standards and things, I was, really engaged in that work. So I think that those concepts and those understandings, I was trying to figure out how to bring it into this work. And I did do some research to see what other coaches maybe had similar setups. And then but also think about other service-based models and just study how to like set the price points for sliding scale. And then I used like that formula from the Quick Start program that we
Right.
get about how to come up with your prices. And I had to do like a lot of a lot of like rejiggering and figuring out exactly how to make it work to line up with the sliding scale.
That's really cool. And there was something else that I was thinking of as you were talking too. I think a lot of times um, when people have to pay for something, whether they're paying $5 or whether they're paying $100, if they pay, there's buy-in to that process. So for the people that might not be able to pay the higher scale, there's still going to be expectations that you're going to be able to meet as a coach. So it's still allowing people to get the great skill that you're going to be able to offer them and to give them that coaching and still have skin in the game. Because if somebody was doing something where it wasn't going to cost them anything, there may not be an effort put forth by the individual because, nah, I'm getting this for free. I'll just do what I want. But now when it has to be paid for, they expect results and they're likely going to work harder when it comes to the coaching relationship. Do you find that that's true from both sides of that scale?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm learning so much as I go through this. I think no matter what I found so far is that no matter where people are at on the scale, it's like that's not the determining factor in their investment. A lot of it is
Right.
more related to like their fears, the things that are more holding them back. So and what's also interesting is I do have one slot that's always pro bono or pay as you wish. And I specifically did pay as you wish because of what you said. I think people also want to contribute and want to pay for services as well. But there's also an amazing organization, which IPEC has also partnered with, called Coaching for Everyone, that offers pro bono coaching. So any coaches can sign up to offer that slot as well. It's a fantastic program, and they offer a lot to people who go through the coaching program in addition to what you offer as a coach. And then they also get BIPOC individuals certified through sponsoring their tuition for their partner with IPEC and CTI so far. So that's also been an amazing organization to partner with.
Yeah, it's a fellowship. They do fellowships for potential coaches that may not have the means to be able to pay for the training, but they'll do that and they'll sponsor them. And it's a wonderful partnership that we've had, and it was something that we did, I think, starting last year. So
Yeah.
we've had one cohort so far. So it's been really good. And, you never know what we'll do in the future either. So tell us a little bit about how your business is going since you've put everything in place.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You always hear like entrepreneurship isn't easy, which is 100% true. But I also think one thing that Grace and you talked about before, one thing I wasn't prepared for was like the first few months, the kind of like emotional roller coaster that you go through, having so many things to figure out and trying to figure out, everything from like the legal structures to how you're going to package everything to how you're going to promote yourself. It can feel really overwhelming. So I think one thing that's amazing as coaches who have gone through IPEC, we learn so many of those tools to be able to like recognize when the fears are coming up, when the internal blocks are coming up, and how to almost like self-coach through that. But also consistently having a coach for me has been a game changer. And I think the thing that has been really helpful for me is just to approach everything as a learning experience, everything as an experiment, because you never know how things are going to land, how things are going to go. And sometimes it's almost like you're planting, I don't know, like breadcrumbs along a trail, and then all of a sudden stuff will explode and you don't know exactly where it came from or like what happened. But it's really cool to see how that work that you put in over time, like the more consistent you are, the more persistently you show up. And the more you lean into yourself being vulnerable and like doing things in a way that feels good to you, feels authentic to you. There's 1,000 different ways you can run a business. There's 1,000 different ways you can market. And I think it's good to take all that information in, but to an extent, and then you have to
Mhm.
figure out what's going to work for you, what's going to feel aligned for you, what's going to feel exciting and not like an, oh God, I have to, I have to do this again, I have to post this again, So I think that getting into that flow and recognizing that I get to do things in a way that works for me and keeps my energy engaged has been a really helpful learning for me along the way.
I think that's awesome because everybody is an individual. You can't be cookie cutter. You have to be able to be you. And I just got a note from Justin. We have a question in the box and it's going to be for you. So we have somebody that chimed in. I'm interested in doing coaching for nonprofit staff, specifically fundraisers. I like the option of the scale or the sliding scale pricing. Can you share your rate range or resources to use for determining pricing levels?
Yes, absolutely. So like one thing, I'm going to see if I can actually pull it up really quickly and just put it in the chat, because there's one model that I found to be really helpful around sliding scale. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up real quick. So I think it's kind of what I was saying, like try to research different ranges. The rates are going to be different depending on where you live, what your living expenses are, whether you're, if like I don't have any kids, for example, so if I had children, my rates would have to be higher. I also live in Florida where there's no income taxes. I used to live in New York City, which is much higher cost of living. So using that model, we get it in the Quick Start program, but if you're not in IPEC yet, there's lots of other resources to figure out how to set your hourly rates based on how many like paid hours you're going to be working per week versus non-paid hours. And then you also, one thing that I had to determine was how many slots were going to be on my sliding scale. So I have 5. Some people have 3, some people have 2. So some people have like, here's my rate, if you can afford everything, and here's my discounted rate if you can't. I also was just speaking to someone recently who has that this isn't posted on their website, but when they speak to people, if they're nonprofit staff, they get 25% discount to their regular rates.
Wow.
So there's all different creative ways that you can think about it. If sliding scale speaks to you, I'm more than happy if you want to reach out to me directly to have a conversation. I also have on my website a whole section on sliding scale, why I do it. There's I didn't design it, but this cool graphic called the green bottle exercise, which is what I was trying to find. That's essentially to help people understand where they fall on the scale. And then the other thing to think about is whether, for me, I trust all my clients to tell me where they fall on the scale. I've seen other coaches who want to know someone's income and want to do it based on income. For me, that there's so many different factors other than income that influence someone's financial situation, whether they're supporting family at home or whether they're caretaking or all these different, whether they have student debt. So that was how I approached it, and giving people the choice and trusting in them to make the decision. And the last thing I'll say is I've also had like one client, and let me know if I answered your question or if you want more details. But I've also had one client who started on one part of the scale, and then they got a promotion at work and they said, hey, I want to up to another part of the scale so someone else can fill this slot. So that's been a cool thing to see too. Like people really do get it. And I've also had people who come and say, I'm just going to tell you up front, I'm going to pay at the top of the scale, but I'm coming to work with you because I feel a values alignment with how you're approaching this pricing.
That is so cool, by the way. I love that. And I love that person that came to you and said, hey, I'm going to move up to the next one. Things have changed in my life, or now I can go to that next level and give you that spot back for somebody that isn't there yet, because I'm sure they're getting the best coaching from the best coach, that we have with us. Of course. And it's so funny because we had somebody else put in the chat that you just gave them an idea about discounting their pricing. So that's really, really cool. See, this is why we do this. This is more about talking with an experienced coach, somebody that has gone through coach training and what they've done with it. So keep the questions coming if you still have them, because we still have about 5 minutes. But in that 5 minute time frame, Emily, is there anything that you want to share with people that we hadn't touched upon yet that you think is really important to a coaching business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, one of the things that we learn is hopefully through a coaching program is like, what are the things that energize us and what are the things that drain us? I think that one of the things I was the most nervous about going to be a solopreneur was that I am so highly motivated by others. I love connection with other people. And I really felt like it was important to build that sort of community, and I didn't know exactly how. But I found a few different ways to do that. And I've found a really great community of coaches that I have that are really supportive. I also stay in touch with people in my cohort, and having done it virtually, I think it was a different, I was going through it during the pandemic and everything was virtual. So it was a different experience, but we still are really close and you have to work to maintain those connections. But that's been really helpful just to have, those folks kind of like cheering you on, but also to be able to ask like, hey, did I understand this concept correctly? Or how are you approaching your pricing? Or how are you navigating government contracts? Or, all these different things, just to have people to bounce ideas off of. That community and connection you have to really intentionally build. And I'm also finding that it's wonderful to have that in coaches, and it's also wonderful to have that in other ways, like in other industries, because then you also become known as like the coach in that circle. And that can help with, they might, like, people in that circle might want to work directly with you. They might have referrals for you. None of that was the point of me being a part of that. It was just having that human connection, but that's been a really crucial part for me.
Well, and guess what I found out? We still have more time.
Ah.
I actually thought this was one of our 30-minute things. We actually have a full 45, maybe even an hour, if people still have questions that they want to go over. But I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think for us, as an organization, one of our biggest things is having a sense of community. And that's something that we offer to everybody. And it's something that students will have a lifetime access to, whether they went through the program, last cycle or, 15 years ago. This is something that people are able to be a part of, because it's a great spot to be able to ask questions of people that have already gone through the journey, or maybe going through the journey at the same pace that you are. It could be one of your classmates. It could be a seasoned coach that has a lot of experience around business building. So that's why it's important for us to be able to share our knowledge that we can with anybody that is looking for it,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Emily, another great question that I was just thinking of. On average, how many clients do you keep on maybe like a weekly or monthly basis? What do you have that keeps you nice and steady?
This is a great question. So I was just having a conversation with my coach about this morning. So because of the economic justice model I set up, I wanted to have like flexible payment schedules and flexible also timing in terms of how often people were working together. So at the beginning, I was more flexible with like, we don't have to meet every week or every other week. It was less structured. However, I'm learning that, or I'm witnessing rather, that when folks are meeting with me, at least on a biweekly basis, like the progress that they're making is so different, like measurably different than the clients that I'm working with less often, especially at the beginning. So I'm actually in the process of like reconfiguring my packages and trying to figure out how I can keep that economic justice aspect and still make it more condensed. So what I'm haven't publicly put out yet, but I'm thinking of right now is doing like 100 days of coaching, at least as the starting point that people work with me. And then I think after you have that comfortability, once you have that established relationship, if people sign on again, then I think it is okay to do like a couple weeks or once a month, because they have a lot of the tools that they've learned at the beginning of your partnership, and you have that established relationship and that established trust and rapport. So you don't have to meet as frequently for it to be, for them to be growing as much. So that was a really fancy way of not giving you a
Well, I got 100 days. So we're talking about 3 months, a little bit over 3 months.
Yeah.
But if somebody was to extend that, what is your largest package that you offer, length of time?
So currently the largest package is 9 sessions. But then after someone's an established client, then I just have it on a month-to-month basis. So they don't have to commit to anything like long term. They can just say, because maybe some people only need like 1 or 2 more sessions after the first package, and other people want to work together for a year.
Okay.
So it really depends on that client. It depends on what they have going on. And it depends on what they want to work on, because some people come to specifically work on a career transition, and then we of course end up talking about a bunch of other things, or they work through that career transition, and through that they realize that there's all these other issues that they want to address in becoming a better partner, or becoming a better communicator, or building more like fun into their life.
Yeah.
So oftentimes that can be like the next iteration of the coaching partnership.
And, you just really kind of keyed in on something, because even though you may coach in a particular space, you now have that ability to coach on whatever's going to come up in that conversation. That
Yes.
is the joy of core energy coaching, being
Yeah.
able to coach anybody on anything. So I'm kind of curious then.
Can I
When
tell you
you
a story really quickly on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a client right now who came, like they're coming in, they wanted to know, they're miserable in their job, and they wanted to either feel better at work, less stressed at work, and they realized they were bringing a lot of that stress home to their family, or they wanted to kind of pivot and leave their job. And so that's how they came in, like wanting to figure those things out. And we were in our 5th session, and they, when they came in, they were in a lot of like catabolic energy, which, if you haven't gone through IPEC, it's a lot of like the guilt, the shame, the frustration, the anger. And they were really drained all the time, and very, very high levels of stress. And then in our 5th session, they had found completely shifted to looking at their work as ways to learn new things, as new opportunities. They said, 3 things happened to me on Monday that would have sent me into a spiral.
Wow.
And I was almost like non-reactive to it. Like I just took it in stride. I decided what I needed to address in that moment, and I decided what could hold on to the next day. And the magical thing that happened was the next day someone else had resolved it, and I didn't even have to deal with it. And
Wow.
so we hadn't even exactly gotten to those decision points that they wanted to work through, but the transition, the emotional and like spiritual and mental transition that they had gone through to be able to just show up at work differently was incredible. And the way that has impacted their life, their family life, the way that they've established like self-care routines and prioritizing themselves, and knowing, here are the things that I need to do at the beginning of every day so that I feel centered, grounded, and ready to go. So like what you're talking about in core energy coaching, I think it was just such a powerful, I have chills all over just talking about like such a powerful example of this client who, an immense transformation in such a short period of time because of that core energy coaching, because that's exactly what we're like walking people through.
I love that. And it's amazing, because as you were talking and you were describing that situation, the first thing I thought about, change of perspective, change the energy. And that's the whole thing that this person did. They went in and they looked at these things that may have been a challenge more as an opportunity. That's the magic of core energy coaching.
Yeah.
That's what we do. I'm sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. I'm going to put myself on mute again. So
Yeah.
want to fill in some other stuff that you have been thinking about. Maybe there's some other stories about some clients that you really helped have some breakthroughs.
Yeah. So another one I'll share about is they also wanted, so I would say probably 75% of my clients who come are wanting to work on career transitions. We end up talking about lots of different things, of course. So I have another client who, was focusing on this next phase of their career and really wanted to figure that out. And what we ended up actually working through a lot of was they had recently come out to people in their life who had not been accepting, and they had kind of gone through all these different, and they had been in a lot of therapy and working through that. But the coaching orientation to working through that and thinking about like, what do you want to do from here, was a huge shift for them as well. And like first getting really comfortable, and I'm trying to think of the phrase that they used because it was so powerful, but it, like, they're just so unflinchingly confident in who they are, that now if someone doesn't accept them, like they're in a point where they're like, that's not on me, that's on them, and I get to choose who I invite into my life and who I don't. So I think like, and I think I remember going through IPEC and some people being uncomfortable with conversations like that, like, well, we're coaches, we're not therapists, and like trying to figure out how you can work through different things. But I think there is so much power that the space that we can hold as coaches for people to talk through those, like, really, not the trauma obviously, but to
Right.
talk through like what it is that they want to do next, where they want to go from here, how they want to show up in their life, and like just building that internal strength and that courage and confidence that can get them through these really tough scenarios that people have to face all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the fact that you said we're not therapists. And I think that that's really important because a lot of the times on a daily basis, the question that I get a lot is, what's the difference between coaching and therapy? And, we're not trained to diagnose. We're not doing that. And a lot of the times, in simplest definition, what I always like to tell people is that, like, therapists and counselors, they're going to work with a person and they're going to take them from where they were to where they are today. A coach is going to take that person from where they are today to where they want to be tomorrow. It's
Mhm.
that forward thinking. And I love that that individual said, you know what? I'm going to be able to be me. And what somebody else says or does, it's all upon them. How I choose to react to it, that's what I can control. And that's having that awareness, because in most cases, what people do when they have these reactions, they're really doing that by default. It's the
Mm,
only thing that they know. They don't see anything different. So with this process, it's bringing that sense of awareness to why they're doing that, and then give them the ability to make choices rather than that default reaction. So when we talk about core energy coaching, and we're talking about shifting the energy, that's really what we're talking about. Changing how people are reacting to situations that are put in front of them. And Emily had talked earlier about, catabolic energy. That's one part. And then there's another one that we call anabolic. But for simplest definition, it's really good and bad. If we wanted to use like very, very simple terms. And a lot of times people might be in their daily grind and they're coming from that place of pretty bad energy, but they don't realize it because it's who they are, right? It's how they've always been. But this is the magic of being able to help people change that and shift that. So um, here's another business question. How's it been going so far? Once you got everything kind of laid out to the point where you're at now, you know, in your journey?
yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. It's really fulfilling. It's a lot of like consistent work and dedication. And I think it's also just giving yourself all the grace and compassion that you give to, your clients, whoever else you're working with, because it's so much to sort of figure out along the way. And I think when you were talking about this, when you're talking about energy leadership and like the core energy coaching, I think that has been such an incredible tool for me as a business owner too, because I recognize when I'm starting to feel like frustration, or starting to think like, oh my God, what am I doing? And like, am I capable of this? And all these different things. And I recognize that I can like see it coming up into my thoughts. And then I can give myself space to feel that, understand why I'm feeling that, acknowledge that that's completely normal
Right.
to feel that way when I'm doing something new and trying to figure all this stuff out. And then choose, okay, how do I want to feel? How do I want to approach this? What can I learn from this? What are the opportunities here? Or also, like, do I just need a break? Like, do I just need to step
Yeah.
step away, go on a walk, like take the afternoon off, whatever it is, and come back to this when my energy is in a different space. um, I think that's been, I've said to a few other IPEC coaches, like, I don't know how people start a business not being a coach because I don't know if I'd be able to like deal with all of this if I
Yeah,
didn't have those tools.
that is really funny, but I think you're right. How, if you got to that point of being so overwhelmed, what do? If you didn't have these skills for yourself, it could be a completely different scenario that we're talking about right now. But, you know, the thing is with this, you know, you're at choice, but you had to have that knowledge, right? What do I do right now? And it's interesting because, yes, this is steps that you do, but when you do it long enough, the steps become a part of you. So it's not
Mhm.
even that you're coaching, you are a coach. It's not your job, it's who you become. And you become that in every aspect of your life. Like that person that you were coaching, the person has a better relationship with his family, the job, the this, the that, because he had all that capability to make those changes that were the most important, and that awareness piece, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, you guys, no questions except for a couple that we had in the beginning. We're here for you. Does anybody have any questions from Emily that we weren't able to come up with, that I didn't ask, that you feel is important to know? I don't know. What are you thinking, Emily? Got anything else that you want to kind of share about your experience?
I'll just share, like, I have benefited from the like wisdom and advice and support of coaches both further along in their journey at the same point in their journey. And I love talking to other people who have gone through IPEC and other programs and just learning how we can work together. And, whether you're working in like the nonprofit and social impact space, of course, I'd love to talk to you, but also if you're not, if you're just like curious and talking about what it's been like to build out a business or, whether it's sliding scale, whatever it is, I love connecting with people and I love having the supportive community of different coaches. So I'm here if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my website or anything or Instagram, like whatever it is, I'm here, whether you've gone through the program and are a coach or considering the program, definitely here to talk and collaborate.
Or if you just want to expand your network.
Yeah.
And Justin was able to put your link in the chat box so people will be able to connect with you that way. Okay.
Awesome. Wonderful.
And, like Emily, I'm also a graduate of the program. And I went through way back in 2010. So I've been a certified coach for years and years, but unlike Emily, I don't have a coaching business because it wasn't something that I ever thought of, at least yet. But I'm very fortunate. I love what I do as an admissions coach, and I can see myself doing this probably for years and years to come. But for sure, if I ever got to that point where I might want to start a business, I'll be reaching out to Emily when that time comes. Because now we've had this chance to experience this time together, and she'll be able to share what she's done and, maybe help a new business owner along the way somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
But if nobody has any questions, thank you all for joining us and putting those notes of encouragement. Oh, we got another one. I'm interested in specializing in couples relationships, dating, etc. I'm considering doing the IPEC course. What should I specialize in? That's a really great question. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that somebody can choose from. And I think what's really the most important to know is, like we mentioned earlier, Darcy, once you learn this, you'll know how to coach anybody on anything. So it's really more about learning the how to coach, because the who is who you want your ideal client to be. So Emily, you had an idea right in the beginning. Did you ever waver from what you thought your niche was going to be to what it is today? Because I know that question comes up a lot too.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's still evolving. I think going in, I was like very specific that it was like I wanted to work with people who are in some sort of social impact space. Now I have several clients who are not, and I love them. They're like so much fun to work with. So I think I'm realizing also that the economic justice model and the sliding scale, of course, it's not just for, I don't know why this was like a limitation in my mind before, but of course, it's not just for people who are in those fields. It's for that really my intention behind it was that anyone could work with a coach. So I think it has evolved. I will also say, Darcy, as I was going through the program when they did the webinar on relationship and couples coaching, I was jazzed up. Like that sounded so cool. My partner had different opinions about whether that would be suitable for me. But I think, like Grace said, you get these foundational tools. There are specialties like in the hub once you're in it that you can work through. And then of course with Core Dynamics, you can also apply those to different things. So I think that it's really it's like this foundation that you have, and then you can apply it to different things. And I have 2 clients that I've been coaching. I'm not coaching them as a couple, but I'm coaching them through things that they're dealing with in their relationships. So, this really does just give you the foundation and the tools to be able to coach anyone on any topic. But
yeah, and I think what's really important too, Darcy, is that when somebody earns their certification, it's as a CPC or certified professional coach. So that designation will remain yours. It's more about the positioning. So if you do want to call yourself a certified relationship coach, absolutely 100%. But maybe there's a couple of disciplines that you like. Maybe you want to call yourself a certified dating and relationship coach or a certified life and relationship coach. That's the option is yours. Okay. Because there's so many things. And as you learn this, sometimes that vision will become clearer the more that you learn the skills too. And you might be drawn to something completely different than you thought about in the beginning. That happened to me. I was going to go corporate. And because that was my background, I spent 20 years at General Motors before I started working at IPEC. And then when I was going through the program, lots of things were happening that were very different from working in that corporate space. I was drawn into transition. And that's about helping people navigate through change, because that's where my life was. Different areas of my life, moving to a new state, became empty nester, my mother passed away. It was all kind of happening at once. So that was the one that kind of went to the top, and that's the one I went with. But if I decide to open a business somewhere down the line, it doesn't mean I can't be a really great corporate coach either, because of the background knowledge. So it's kind of nice to know you've got so many things available to you.
Absolutely. And just as a side note, Darcy, I'll also say someone from my cohort, this is what they do. They work with couples and coaching. So I'm happy to connect you with them if you want to reach out to.
This is awesome. I love when questions come in. Well, for those of you that are still here, and for those of you that asked questions, and even those of you that didn't, we appreciate you spending some time with us, and we will, hopefully see you guys soon. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Emily, nice to see you again. Take care.
You too.
Bye.